Episode 9 was the Rhaenys and Meleys special. I think most people saw a big character moment for Rhaenys coming this season because of her being around more important moments compared to the books, but then always falling back to the background and keeping herself out of any conflict. So far, she was one of my favorite characters, almost on King Viserys' level of realism. Episode 9's ending did change that a little for me. I'll talk about my thoughts on that twist at the end of this video, and I'll give a clear spoiler warning beforehand. But let's talk about Meleys first. The she-dragon finally got a nice close-up, and she does look pretty distinct compared to the rest of the dragons in the show. The books only describe Meleys as a scarlet red dragon with pink and copper accents. It's how she got the nickname of the Red Queen. The show's special effects department took a liberty to adding the wide horns protruding from her face. Good stuff. Very select few dragons get their own epithet. The Red Queen is amongst those ranks. If Rhaenys is the wise one of the Targaryen bunch, maybe some of that has rubbed off on Meleys over their long years together as a bonded pair. If Vhagar was given some characterization in House the Dragon, why can't the Queen get some of that too? Though Rhaenys isn't Meleys' first rider. That title goes to Rhaenys' aunt, named Alyssa Targaryen, a character we learned a little about in the most recent supplementary lore book, Fire and Blood. Alyssa is the polar opposite of Rhaenys. She was one of the more wild ones. Alyssa passed down her craziness to our boy Daemon, the Rogue Prince. Yes, Alyssa Targaryen, who was Meleys' first rider, is the mother of King Viserys and his brother Daemon. When Alyssa was 15, she went to the Dragon Pit in King's Landing, ready to pick out her very own partner, and set her eyes on the largest one in the story's history, Balerion the Black Dread. By this point in the story, 75 years after Aegon's conquest, Balerion's age was already showing, being around 175 years old. But he was also very willful. Combining forces with the wild Alyssa and Balerion could have been disastrous. He was too powerful for her nutty hands, so the Dragon Keepers persuaded her to go for a far faster, swifter dragon that would make for more exciting flights. Meleys was the quicker dragon. Meleys was as swift a dragon as Westeros had ever seen, easily outpacing Caraxes and Vhagar when Alyssa and her brothers flew together. We don't know her dragon's age, but likely a bit younger than Caraxes, which is now Daemon's bloodworm. The princess did not act like a girl in this setting. She was very similar to Arya Stark. She wore boys' clothes when she could, shunned the company of other girls, preferred riding and climbing and dueling with wooden swords, to sewing and reading and singing, and refused to eat porridge. Trained in the yard when she could, even broke her nose that left it permanently crooked. Alyssa was married to her older brother, Prince Balon Targaryen, who for a short time was the heir to the Iron Throne, just right behind his big brother and his father the Old King, but that never played out. Alyssa was obsessed with her brother since they were children. Even their mother knew Alyssa was meant for Balon. The books hilariously mention if they weren't flying together on their dragons, they were in bed together. Against all sensible advice, Alyssa had the idea of bringing her newborn on one of these flights when Viserys was just days old. Did the same for Daemon 4 years later. So her character is tied to Meleys. Maybe not Meleys in particular, just her magic ability to fly on her back. At the age of 24, Alyssa died to childbirthing complications, like so many female characters in the story. And Meleys became vacant in 83 AC, after an 8-year bond with Alyssa. A fairly peaceful 8 years, since the Red Queen wasn't taken into smaller skirmishes like what was done with Vhagar and Caraxes. Meleys would only be alone for 4 years, however. 87 AC was when a 13-year-old Rhaenys went into the Dragon Pit, same as her aunt, and picked out the Red Queen. Princess Rhaenys was born on the 7th day of the 7th moon of the year, which the Septons judged to be highly auspicious. Think of that moment with Rhaenyra and that white deer in House the Dragon, a sign she was meant for great things. Large and fierce, Rhaenys had the black hair of her Baratheon mother and the pale violet eyes of her Targaryen father. Obviously House the Dragon changed that to make her look more Targaryen. The only notable thing mentioned between the duo Rhaenys and Meleys was when they joined the Old King during one of his longer tours around the Seven Kingdoms in 89 AC. It was on Greenshield, in Lord Chester's hall, that Princess Rhaenys told him of her plans to marry the sea snake, Lord Corlys Velaryon, and receive the king's blessing. "You could not have chosen a better man," he said. "Only you could have won me away from the sea," Corlys told the princess. "I came back from the ends of the earth for you." Rhaenys at 16 was a fearless young beauty and more than a match for her mariner. A dragon rider since the age of 13, she insisted upon arriving for the wedding on Meleys, the Red Queen, the magnificent scarlet she-dragon that had only once borne her aunt Alyssa. "We can go back to the ends of the earth together," she promised Sir Corlys, "but I'll get there first, as I'll be flying." One of the few happy couples in the story, it seems. When there was some invaders in the Stormlands, some firepower was needed to send the pirates back to sea. The battle would be led by Rhaenys' father, the Old King's heir, Prince Aemon, and even Corlys joined in. The princess had just learned she was expecting a child, else she would have accompanied her sire on Meleys. Into battle? The prince said, as if I would have permitted that. You have your own battle to fight. Lord Corlys will want a son, I'm sure, and I would like a grandson. So again, Meleys was left out of the fighting. Prince Aemon died on that battlefield by a surprise crossbow bolt, and Viserys' father followed a decade later, which caused a bit of a succession issue for the old king. Some wanted Rhaenys to be the one sitting on the Iron Throne, or at least the young son she had with Corlys, they named Laenor. But we now know how that went. It's why Rhaenys is called the Queen Who Never Was. Her husband would not forget the slight on his family because of all his pride, but Rhaenys was happy enough with her family and dragon on the island Driftmark. Dragons grow best outside the dragon pit, without all the chains restraining their growth, and inability to hunt as freely as they wish. The Queen Who Never Was and her Red Queen lived in paradise. Meleys had grown lazy over the years, but still remained as fearsome as ever when roused. Rhaenys is not mentioned to be as airborne as her aunt. After all these years going on leisurely flights, her dragon will be needed in the coming civil war in House the Dragon, which kicks off in 129 AC after a 42-year bond with Rhaenys. The prequel's adaptation added in a little plotline these characters were never given in lore books, and here's that spoiler warning. Held against her will in King's Landing during Aegon II's surprise coronation that was against King Viserys' wishes, Rhaenys was on an escape mission. The announcement took place within the dragon pit, above the dragon's lairs, to be in a more open area in comparison to the Red Keep or Sept. Or maybe it took place here just for that shocking Meleys moment to happen. In the midst of all the small folk cheering for their male king, Rhaenys atop her dragon managed to easily break through the ground from deep below, killing at least a couple hundred innocent people without blinking an eye. Meleys approached the Greens, all her opposition there, but decided to hold back on the Dracarys and fly away to Dragonstone to warn Rhaenyra instead. It made for a visually stunning scene, and I'm sure the writers wanted everyone at the edge of their seat, but it was kinda shallow. By the time I'm recording this, the season finale hasn't aired yet, so a few lines of dialogue can change my opinion on this shocking moment. Because right now, it was just there for the shock value and CGI porn. One of the writers immediately added in some context to what was only some stares between Rhaenys and Alicent Hightower. The writer said this wasn't Rhaenys' war, and the casualties mean nothing because they're commoners. That explanation doesn't really cut it. Hearing Rhaenys explain what happened next week, saying something to the effect of I had every intention on burning them all, but held back in the last moment to avoid a full-blown war, would be nice. We've seen the front and back entrance to the dragon pit. These doors weren't made for these big guys. That's the back door. Rhaenys makes her spectacle for little to no reason. It does hurt her character a bit, who I was really enjoying. There's time for her to be number one in my book again. I do hope the show continues giving this duo more to do.